All right, Nuggets fans, welcome in to Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends here at Mile High Sports. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn, at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network. And I am here in the post kind of off-season era. I was going to say postseason. I guess it is the postseason, but just not for the Nuggets. Very unfortunate here as we now have to transition into off-season coverage. And if you caught my last episode on Sunday night, you'll know that I kind of started that process, not really too seriously, but more just talking about what I think the problem is for Denver. And I think most of this week is going to be about like larger big picture things that I want to kind of get off my chest about this season. And then next week we can kind of turn the page, so to speak, right? Talk about individual players a little bit more, where Denver has to go from here, things like that. There's plenty of time to still go over some things, but there are things that need to be discussed. So we will do that here. Very excited to get into it now. I am recording this on Monday night, and I'm going to be recording a couple of these episodes on Monday night with the intention of releasing them over the course of this week. So if there is a major event that happens, then I will change my schedule. Of course, I'll re-record some things, add to some things, but I don't think I'm going to be going live that much. So sorry for that if that's the case, but I do think that there's just stuff that I want to be taken care of and really start to pivot into my personal off season. So we'll be recording some things. And up first on the docket here, I want to talk about the front office failings. I want to talk about what happened this year and what Denver needs to do from here in order to change things up. First segment, let's lay out the moves. Let's lay out what happened. I think that's probably the most important thing. What happened here from Denver's perspective, and what can Denver do, I think, to sort of understand what's going on. Sorry, I got pinged here and got a little distracted. Okay, let's lay out the moves. What happened? I wrote an article on milehighsports.com that you should go read if you want to have another perspective on what ultimately came to pass from last Nuggets offseason and why they kind of set themselves up for failure. And I wanted to expand upon that here. So without further ado, here is the full list of offseason moves the Nuggets made during the 2024-25 calendar in order to try to win a championship in these playoffs. The first thing they did was they traded the 28th overall pick, I believe it was, and 3 second-round picks to move up 6 spots to select DaRon Holmes II. DaRon Holmes, of course, tears his Achilles just a few weeks later. Later in this week, I'm going to be talking about reasons to be optimistic, and DaRon Holmes is part of that. He was a piece that Denver just did not have at their disposal this year, who I am still very high on, who I still think is going to be a very important player for the Nuggets rotation going forward. And so it was unfortunate, of course, that this happened. This was not Calvin Booth's fault. This was nobody's fault. Injuries happen. It just sucks. And Denver spent 3 second-round picks in addition to a first-round pick in order to move up to get DaRon. The next thing they did was they traded another 3 second-round picks in order to offload Reggie Jackson's $5 million expiring deal to the Charlotte Hornets. And while you can paint the last move as a reasonable move if you believe that DaRon Holmes is going to be somebody that you can count upon, this one never sat right with me, this Reggie Jackson trade. And the reason why, teams are always looking, and I mean always, looking for expiring contracts that they can utilize in as part of deals to then like take on bad money from a team or take on their other player. You attach a pick. Like, if Denver had a 2031 first round pick in Reggie Jackson's expiring contract, they would have been able to go out and get a rotation player in this last trade deadline. They didn't have that because they signed Dario Saric to a taxpayer mid-level exception, including a player option for the next year that he is almost certainly going to pick up. So keep in mind, the first two moves, Denver spent 6 second-round picks and a first-round pick and got 0 minutes out of it. Again, not Deron Holmes' fault, but just kind of the unfortunate nature of the situation. Next, they allowed Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to walk away without any compensation afforded to them. This is the second straight year that they allowed a key rotation player, a key player around their core. I wouldn't call him a core player because Denver was still able to get back to the same place without him the very next year. But I do think that he was a key role player. And anytime you allow somebody like that to walk away without compensation, when you had an opportunity to get something, Denver could have traded for Tim Hardaway Jr. in this offseason. I don't like Tim Hardaway Jr. I don't think that he's a great value player, but he was also, again, a large expiring contract that they could have used, somebody that they could have started or had come off the bench or just be a good vet to have around the locker room, and somebody that they could have absolutely utilized or flipped at the deadline like Reggie Jackson. If we're talking about moves, you could have gotten Reggie Jackson and Tim Hardaway Jr.'s contract and then go and got yourself a $20 million player. And it would have been a pretty good deal at the deadline. Of course, they couldn't do that because they were unwilling to take back money. And that is an ownership thing just as much as it is a front office thing. But we were kind of sold this vision of snake oil, and I was kind of sold this. I thought that the added flexibility of not having Kentavious Caldwell-Pope around, not having his contract around, getting below the second tax apron, I thought that that was going to be good enough to allow them to pair together some contracts to then make the prospective deals the next things. What I didn't fully appreciate was the fact that the Nuggets just don't want to pay the tax. They don't want to pay the second tax apron. They don't want to have those obligations be penalizing them on a consistent basis. And they just didn't want to spend the money for that. So it's hard to blame him. I get why. KCP wasn't necessarily the guy to go over for. But if you are going to try to compete at the highest possible level, you pay the most amount of money that you need to in order to get it done. And the Nuggets have just not been willing to do that on or off the floor, for being honest. Like I said, they signed Dario Saric to the taxpayer mid-level exception. That is their one bargaining chip that they had with free agents this past offseason in order to give that guy, those players, additional money above a minimum contract. And they spent it on a guy that had 16 games played this year and 210 total minutes. A ludicrously bad signing in retrospect. I don't necessarily blame Calvin Booth for thinking that that would work out. I thought it would work out. Of course, he is paid to be better than I am. So the fact that it didn't work out, it sucks. But again, all of these four moves, all four, trading 6 second-round picks, using a first-round pick, allowing KCP to walk away without compensation, signing Dario Saric, it got them a total of 200 minutes and 0 playoff minutes. So pretty horrible stuff. The Nuggets were going to allow Jalen Pickett to be the backup point guard heading into this year until Jokic balked, until he said, I need a veteran here. We need guys who are ready to win. What are we doing? Jalen was not ready the previous year. I thought Jalen made some progress from his rookie to a sophomore year, of course. But then when the playoffs rolled around, he clearly wasn't ready for that either. So Denver got Russell Westbrook. And to be fair to Russell Westbrook, he helped them during the regular season. It wasn't perfect. I didn't enjoy the experience. there were some great things about having Russell Westbrook aboard. There were also some really difficult things about having Russell Westbrook aboard. He was very difficult for Michael Malone to manage personally, and he got away with some things that other guys didn't necessarily like. And it's tough, unfortunately, because Denver absolutely needed everybody pulling the same direction. Russ was not like a locker room problem or anything like that, but he's going to do things his way. And it didn't always fully align. Like, it's not his fault. Again, he's a 17-year vet. He's done things and has been extremely successful in his entire career. Not trying to denigrate him at all. But he's also somebody that's very hard to maneuver around. And the Nuggets had to really kind of maneuver a lot of things. And by adding Russ and moving Christian Brown into the starting lineup and starting Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter kind of being flimsy at best for much of the season from an actual spacing standpoint, and Jamal Murray not necessarily wanting to take a bunch of threes, the only guy that really amped up their three-point volume was Jokic. And so Denver was the worst three-point shooting team in the league from a volume standpoint. And in the modern era, you need to be able to amp it up. And Denver just didn't have the guys that could do that. Peyton Watson, I think, contributed to that problem. Julian Strawther needed to be taking more threes, but also wanted to stay in the rotation, so he stopped taking as many bad shots. And so he stayed in the rotation. Other moves that Denver made this past offseason. They re-signed DeAndre Jordan. They re-signed Vlatko Čančar. They allowed Justin Holiday to walk. And that's it. That's what Denver did. Those are the things. Their big additions were Russell Westbrook and Dario Saric. Their big loss was Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. But more than anything, it was basically staying the same. From the 2023-24 season, the assessment was that they were close then and that they didn't need that much. And so they decided in the offseason, we're not going to change that much. We're not going to do anything crazy. What we're going to do is keep things mostly status quo. We might add a fringe veteran here, a rotation piece there. And we're going to try to see what Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, Julian Strawther can do in slightly more elevated roles. And Christian stepped up. Peyton had some good moments. Julian was fine, solid. But only Christian was really, truly ready for the playoffs. Julian had a great moment. Peyton, I don't think, was great. I don't think he was fully ready. And that he might be going forward. He might not be. So curious to see what Denver decides to do with him. But the fact is that Denver, I think during the regular season, had plenty of opportunities where it could and should have been pointed out that they were not good enough to win a championship. And I tried to do that. I said that I did not think that the way that they were going was going to point them in the right direction for winning a title. And this is not about being right. This is about there were signs. There were signs along the path that I tried to really amplify and say, look, as great as the team has been before, as awesome as they were in 22-23, and as much as it looked great in 2023-24, other teams have gotten better, and the Nuggets have either stayed the same or gotten slightly worse during that time. And so now you've got great teams like OKC who elevated themselves. Minnesota, I didn't think that they were the same level of quality, but they're the same, if not better, than they were prior to the trade of Karl Anthony Towns during this offseason. And so Denver, kind of behind the eight ball now. They're a team that is not in the top tier of the Western Conference. And they haven't been for at least a little bit. The question is, can they get back to that point? Is there a way for them to get back to that point with the way that things have been so mismanaged? Because the fact of the matter is that the Nuggets front office did not manage this well. They spent assets willy-nilly. They did not maximize things. for a team that was already asset starved. Like, I haven't even talked about why Denver doesn't have any first round picks that they can really maneuver. It's because they traded them for Peyton Watson and Julian Strother, among others, including Hunter Tyson and Jalen Pickett. But Denver's got so many things that have gone into a flawed roster that did not work. And now it's going to be up to the next iteration of the front office to right a lot of wrongs along that path. After the break, let's talk about, are the Nuggets screwed? Like, is this over? Like, can they recover from this? And if not, what do the Nuggets need from their front office in the near future? We'll be right back here on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we are back. Pickaxe and Roll, Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're enjoying. Would really, really appreciate it. Let's get into this simple question. Are the Nuggets screwed? Like, is this it? And I don't think you can say outright that they're not. And that's a problem. I know that I'm a negative guy overall. I know that it's sometimes tough to listen to my show because I try to come across as realistic, and what that ultimately means sometimes is a negative perspective if I don't think the Nuggets are going to win the championship. And yet, they showed a lot of promise with their current group. Jokic, Murray, Porter, Gordon, Brown. I thought that Brown really acquitted himself well in the playoffs. I thought that Porter, if you want to point to a reason for optimism, you're going to say, hey, he's not going to have a grade 2 AC joint sprain in the next playoff run. Now, he could have a back injury. He could have a leg injury. Like Aaron Gordon, he could have a hamstring injury. He had hamstring injuries late in the season. So it's not to say that things can't happen again. And so what I think should be pointed out rightly is that Denver's starters in these playoffs were very good, even against the Clippers and even against the Thunder. Like, they weren't perfect. They were clearly two hands tied behind their back sometimes, but Denver's starters were still good enough to compete at a very high level. The problem was that there wasn't enough depth behind them, and Denver starters weren't so good that they couldn't make up for that anymore. In previous seasons, 2023 especially, the Nuggets were able to make up for the fact that they had a flawed bench. If you remember in 2023, Denver's bench was Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, Christian Brown, and then a smidge of DeAndre Jordan whenever they needed a true backup center. It wasn't that much. They did not really go to those guys that often, and that was fine because they had enough. Jokic was healthy. He was like in the prime of his career. Aaron Gordon was in his physical prime. Michael Porter's in his physical prime. Jamal Murray had spent so much time coming back from the torn ACL that he hadn't had a lot of miles on him and was ultimately able to kind of get through that. And then you had Bruce, who leveled up in those playoffs and was efficient and effective and versatile and did a lot of the things that the Nuggets needed him to do. Russ did some of those things. I don't think that's that far off to say that Russell Westbrook was a good appraisal of what Bruce Brown was during these playoffs. Was he efficient enough? No. And that's going to be a thing. It just, yeah, he had to be more efficient. Russ did, and he just wasn't. Was Peyton Watson as reliable as Jeff Green? He made some good plays. Jeff Green, I think, was also a little bit more stable in terms of what he was providing, being in the right place at the right time on both ends of the floor and making plays when needed. But mostly the fact that he was out of the way a lot of the time was good enough. And then did Julian Strother give enough to kind of reprise what Christian Braun was doing? Not really. Christian was averaging about 15 minutes a night. Julian was not nearly that consistent. Um, and then behind that, Denver just had nothing. They didn't have anything that they could really go to. DeAndre Jordan couldn't provide true backup center minutes anymore. Zeke Naji, not somebody that they trusted. Jalen Pickett, they gave him opportunities in the Clipper series. He did not handle it well, and so he didn't play again. Hunter Tyson wasn't going to get an opportunity, I don't think, although his garbage time minutes weren't bad. And then Vlatko Čančar and Dario Saric were just not going to be helpful. So Denver, if your belief is that you get Michael Porter back healthy, you get Aaron Gordon back healthy, Jokic and Murray stay healthy, Christian Braun stays healthy, he gets a little bit better. Maybe Peyton Watson and Julian Strother get a little bit better. Does Russell Westbrook opt into his player option and you just kind of run it back? Maybe you add Deron Holmes to the mix. You get a little bit more versatility from your front court. The players that you add to that mix, you trust a little bit more. If you can get a veteran minimum kind of guy to step in and help you out. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is fully. But I do think that there's at least a world where the Nuggets can talk themselves into, yeah, we took the OKC Thunder to 7 games. Of course we can do it. Why should we overreact? What's the problem with overreacting? Or what's the point of overreacting is what I mean. Why would you do that if you had an opportunity to advance? Now, flawed logic, first and foremost. Denver went to 7 games in the first round, and then I think OKC is going to get better going forward. I do not think that OKC is going to stay the same, and Denver's effectively trying to stay the same, maybe get marginally better, but I just don't believe that they will get marginally better with this group. Denver's kind of, and I've described them as this before, they've passed their half-life as an NBA contender. Jokic is past 30. He's going to turn 31 heading into February of next year. And I think we saw some weaknesses from him in terms of being able to handle all of the physical and emotional and mental pressure that OKC applied to him. Like, he should have been able to manage the Alex Caruso defense in Game 7. He didn't. And I think a lot of that was he's just overtaxed. Not enough guys stepped up. I don't think Jamal Murray stepped up enough. Don't think Michael Porter obviously stepped up well enough. Aaron Gordon was on one leg. Christian Braun, Russell Westbrook. Like, if you get into that similar situation again, is there any reason to believe that it's going to be different? I don't think so. So there are flaws that need to be solved. But I don't think the Nuggets are screwed. But the problem is that they have so few resources to change things around. Let me paint an ugly picture for you. The Nuggets have 0 second-round picks available until after this draft, in which case they will get a 2032 second-round pick 7 years from now. That's something that they could throw in as a little bit of a sweetener, but it's not going to change anybody's fortunes. Now, 6 second-round picks would have, and had Calvin Booth decided not to telegraph that he wanted Deron Holmes and could have just gotten him at the 28th pick, or drafted Ryan Dunn at the 28th overall pick, who was the Phoenix Suns rookie who actually did a pretty good job and probably would have been a nice little counter for what the Nuggets could have ran this year. Or if they didn't trade Reggie Jackson along with 3 second-round picks just to get off of $5 million. I still can't believe that I'm saying that. It's just an insane deal. Denver did not manage their assets well. They do not have a 2025 first or second-round pick. They have a 2026 and a 2028, but they are not allowed to trade those due to the Stepien rule, where you can't trade in back-to-back years, because they've traded 2025, 2027, and 2029. 2027 and 29, both going to the OKC Thunder. Just wanted to really dig in that unfortunate reality for folks. So Denver, they have their 2030, but they can't trade it because they traded 2029. They have 2031, and they can trade that one now, but they can't trade 2020. They can't trade 2031 and 32 because they're in back-to-back years. So no matter which of those they trade, they're still only getting one first-round pick that they can throw out there. Now they could do a couple swaps. You could do like, I think an enticing deal would be Michael Porter Jr., Christian Brown, the 2031 first, and then two swaps in 2030 and 2032. Like that's an interesting deal that I think a lot of teams would be interested in, especially with where Jokic is in his aging curve and where the Nuggets would be after that deal. Like they basically have nothing at that point. So could you entice somebody to take on that kind of package if you are the Nuggets front office trying to get somebody else? Yes. But I just like you got to get it right, man. If you do that for Paul George, you're dead. You're not going to be like that's not helpful. If you do it for Kevin Durant, you're probably dead. I just don't think that that's going to change Denver's fortunes like really at all. Kevin Durant's not going, especially at this stage of his career. Like maybe 2 years ago, you might consider that, but at this stage of his career, I'm not sure that you would really seriously do that deal. Now, if you're getting off of Zeke Naji and Dario Saric, and maybe there's something to be said for it, but I do think that Denver, like, just they're in a caught in between a rock and a hard place. They're going to have to start exploring some of those kinds of concepts because that's the only real way that you can invoke actual change. In terms of just getting role players, you can't just throw out Dario Saric and the Dario Saric and the 2031 first round pick. But is that going to get you a sixth man, a seventh man? Maybe, I guess. It's not going to get you anything better than that. I think there's a lot of Nuggets fans that would prefer if Christian Brown was coming off the bench. But I'm here to tell you, like, he was their fourth best player in the playoffs and is probably going to get paid like it in this offseason. So Denver's in a really tenuous spot where they have to figure out just exactly like the level of things that they have to give up in order to get back the things that they need. And they're going to have one first round pick, either 2031 or 2032, as well as or I guess one second round pick if you wait until after the draft, the 2032 second round pick. And then you've got Michael Porter's contract. If you want to get crazy, Jamal Murray's contract, Christian Brown, if you don't feel like paying his next contract, Peyton Watson, Julian Strawther. Like, teams are going to look at that as Denver's asset pool, and they're going to be like, we can do better. We can do better than that. And so various players that might be available out there, like Giannis, Lauri Markkanen, Kevin Durant, Paul George. Not sure who you're looking for, and we'll have to discuss some names. But in terms of changing Denver's actual future, I don't know which teams are going to be like, you know what? That's what we want. And so you have to be nervous. It's a requirement at this point. I don't think that Denver's going to have an easy time of this. And I think that their front office, whoever takes over, whether it's Ben Tenzer as the interim GM, if he's made permanent, or if it's somebody else that comes in, I don't think they're going to have an easy time of this thing because Jokic has never been one to recruit before. The Nuggets have never gotten good, convenient deals for them except for the Bruce Brown contract. And things just don't happen for Denver the way that they do for other larger markets where that's a lot more enticing to go there because they've got massive practice facilities, a coastal location, and an organization that's going to take care of you off the floor in more ways than one. So I don't have a lot of faith that this thing is going to turn around in a healthy way. And you might have to see Denver break up the core, and you might have to see them do it in a deal that's pretty uncomfortable in order to do it, in order to get back some assets. And you might be getting worse before you have the capability of getting better. And if that's the case, then it might take multiple trades. It might take a blow up. It might take a restructuring in order to get back to a place where you feel like you can be super competitive. So I think that Denver, if they just run this back, if the front office decides we'll add on the fringes and we'll just run it back, I kind of just think they're going to end up in the same place. Second round exit. Maybe they surprise and make a conference finals, but they won't have the requisite depth and star power in order to get it done. That might be wrong, and I'm willing to be wrong. I haven't been wrong about this yet. And like these are the things that I feel pretty comfortable about from just understanding who Denver is and which teams are going to be really good. We'll see what happens, but I tend to think that Denver is now operating from a major disadvantage, and it's going to take a minor miracle to get them back on track here. On that positive note, that is going to do it, I think, for this recorded episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends here at Mile High Sports. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Would really, really appreciate it. If you would like me to go over specific names, specific players, specific free agents, trade targets, things like that, drop them down in the comments of these videos. And over the course of this next week, I will assemble a list and really try to hone in on what's real, what's not real, and what's just pure fantasy. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit that like button on the way out. I'll talk to you guys on Thursday.